who aren't necessarily at work. Initiatives like the Unite Jobs Board, which helps people find jobs in their local area. That shows that trade unions can help not just those in work, but those not in work as well. That is the modern future for trade unionism, and I applaud this work too. I also want to pay tribute to somebody else in your union, Diana Holland. Because while the government were making the oil tankers dispute worse, ramping up the rhetoric by talking about jerry cans, she was trying to resolve it, and did resolve it in a dignified way. Diana, thank you for the leadership. You know, friends, I was coming here on quite a packed train this morning, and in the recent local election campaign, I went around the country a lot, and I'll just relate one short incident to you. I was on a train to Essex with with one colleague of mine from my office who looks a little bit like me. My office tells me that he's much more handsome than me. But we were on this train. I know you don't believe that. We were on this train together, and it was a very packed train. He was sitting next to a lady, and she sent a text to the person sitting opposite her, and the chap in my office caught sight of the text, and it said, "Do you realise we're on the train with two of those Miliband brother lookalikes?" It's apparently becoming a profession. We tried to convince her that it really was me. Look, I want to say to you, your job is to represent your members, and my job is to lead the Labour Party. As Len said, of course there'll be times when we have differences. You'll be candid about them, and so will I. But I think we can all agree we have to find new ways of working together for this country and for the values that we share. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to start by talking about the revelations that you've no doubt read about what's been happening at Barclays Bank. You know, 9 months ago, I talked in my Labour Party conference speech about irresponsible, predatory capitalism. And today we see one of the worst cases yet. Millions of pounds being made by bending the rules, rigging the system to the cost of ordinary borrowers and savers. The banks told us, friends, they had cleaned up their act. But this shines a light on what has really been going on. I think three things need to happen. First, this cannot be about a slap on the wrist, a foregoing of bonuses, a fine, and the end of the matter. To believe that would be totally wrong. When ordinary people break the law, they face the full force of the law. And I say the people that have done the wrong thing in this case should face the full force of the law as well, including criminal prosecution. Second, the government should urgently look at the regulation of this area of banking. We know we've got to change the way things are run, so this can never, ever happen again. But third, there is a much wider issue about the culture of our banking industry. There are many people who work in banking, not well paid, who do a fantastic and important job for our country. But this also shines a light on another part of the banking industry. A swaggering culture which is about serving itself, not serving the public. Too many people in the banks clearly thought they were too big to fail, but they also thought they were too big to be challenged, that they could get away with anything, that they could do anything they liked. They clearly believed they were above the law. And it's yet another example in our country of the rich and powerful having their own moral standards, just as we saw during phone hacking. Friends, we cannot have a country where this sort of thing happens. That is why we need the strongest punishment, a change in regulation, and a change in the culture of our banking system. We need banks that serve a more responsible capitalism, working for the majority of people and enabling us to pay our way in the world. And you know, this failure of the banks highlights an issue that you know much better than I, which is the failure of our economy to work for the working people of this country. You see it in your everyday work. This is an economy that isn't working for most people. It's working okay for a few at the top, but it's not working for most people. Like the couple I met on a train recently. Young people. He had studied aerospace engineering for 5 years at Cranfield University. She was working 30 hours a week as a cleaner at a hospital in order to pay her way through university. This country had made an investment in subsidizing him by helping to pay his university fees. And now what are we doing? We're wasting his talent. We're wasting our investment. We're wasting what he has to offer to the country. That is a tragedy for him, and it's a tragedy for our country as well. And that's the task of the next Labour government. To work with you, to work with others, to rebuild our economy in a different way. And of course, what is this government doing? It's not rebuilding our economy. It's tearing out the foundations of our economy. What have they done? They've turned a recovery into a recession. A double-dip recession made in Downing Street. And what does David Cameron say? He says this, I know you won't be able to believe this, he says, you call it austerity, I call it efficiency. Who is he trying to kid? He says Britain is headed in the right direction, but we have 1 million young people looking for work. We have 6 people chasing every vacancy. We have people seeing their living standards squeezed. What planet is he on? And why are the Tories so out of touch? First, because they're listening to the wrong people. They're listening to those who already have power and influence, not to the working people of this country. They make policy with kitchen suppers for the privileged, cosy country suppers for the powerful. But in Tory Britain, there is no place at the table for the decent, hard-working families of this country. We know it's wrong, and friends, I promise you it will be different under a Labour government. But you know, they're not just out of touch because they listen to the wrong people. They're out of touch because they have the wrong ideology, the wrong ideas. Cutting taxes for millionaires while raising taxes for millions of people. What they call trickle-down economics. Cut taxes at the top, and then everyone else will be okay. Making it easier to fire people. In the Beecroft report, what they should be doing, conference, is making it easier to hire people, not easier to fire people. That is what our economy needs. Let's call it what it is. Old-fashioned Tory economics. Wrong, inefficient and unfair. And making the problems of our country worse, not better. Just ask the workers at the Corrigan oil refinery, hundreds of whom will now lose their jobs. We know the government had a clear choice. They could have done all they could to help save the refinery, or they could stand aside and do nothing. And that's the course they chose. They said their hands were tied because of the European Commission. But friends, they didn't even ask the European Commission what could be done. I say, if other governments can fight to keep their refinery open, why can't ours? And Britain doesn't just need a change of ideas, it needs a change of mindset as well. Because what is the other problem with this government? You know, they really do believe there is no alternative. That phrase last used in the 1980s. They really do believe the 1930s idea that when you're in a global downturn, there is nothing that can be done. And so what do we have? We have the spectacle of the powerful saying to the powerless, well look, I'm really sorry, we're in for a few bad years, but there's nothing we can do about it. When it's not they that will suffer as a result of those few bad years. And then what happens? International summits come and go. The G20 summit last week, the European summit this week. And what do we get from the British Prime Minister? No leadership. Just the same old mantra. The same mindset that has been failing us for the last 2 years. Friends, you and I know there is an alternative. There is an alternative. There is always an alternative, and that's what I want to talk to you about now. If Labour was in government, we would get our economy growing again. That is the first thing we would do. The first thing I would do as Prime Minister. We would cut VAT. We would encourage businesses to take on new workers. We would invest in our infrastructure. And most important of all, we would put our young people back to work. It's just wrong that so many young people, including that aerospace engineer that I met, the man we had trained as a country, it's just wrong that he languishes on the dole for year after year. You know, long-term youth unemployment has doubled in the last year alone. It doesn't have to be this way. I think we all say, tax the bankers' bonuses and put our young people back to work. My promise to you, whenever that election comes and whenever that Labour government comes, a Labour government would get our young people working again. But we don't just need change in the short term. We need more than that. We need to rebuild our economy from the ground up. And we need to look further back than the current crisis or even the current government. Because for too long, and you know this better than I, we've had an economy that doesn't work for most working people in this country. An economy where industry isn't served by finance, but is serving finance. An economy where too many young people leave school without the hope of a real career. An economy where people are working as hard as they can. Not just one job, but 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 60, 70 hours a week, and still find themselves in poverty. We need to change all that. That's the task of the next Labour government. And that task will be even more important because of the mess this government has made of things. The hard truth is this: whoever wins the next election will inherit a deficit. And because there will be less money around, the best route to social justice will be to change our economy. Change our economy so it does work for working people. And I want to tell you about my vision of the economy of the future. First of all, it's an economy where real engineering is more important than financial engineering. Where every young person, whether they go to university or not, feels they have a chance of a career and have the skills and training that they need. Where we encourage companies to invest in the long-term future of our economy, not the short-term fast buck. And where nobody who works is in poverty. That's the vision of the economy of the future. That's the vision that we must work towards. And how do we build it? It can't be on the basis of old-style free market economics. That has failed. It can only be built by government, employers and unions understanding their role and each playing their part. First of all, government. Government needs to back the sectors that will succeed in the future, that will succeed for our country in the future. That's not about picking winners, it's what countries all around the world do. A modern industrial policy that can create good jobs at decent wages for people right across Britain. It means backing small businesses and addressing the financial barriers they face, with ideas like a British investment bank for small business. And it means taking skills seriously as well. That's why the next Labour government will say, that's something very simple to employers, just as a sign of what we believe needs to happen. You won't get a major government contract unless you offer apprenticeships for the next generation. That's how we make our economy work for working people across this country. For employers and unions, it will often mean working together as well. That's what you're showing right across the country. You know, I'm not going to come here and deny that there will be conflict at the workplace between workers and employers, because often you see that in your daily lives. But what you also see in your daily lives is cooperation as well. When there is conflict, you will stand your ground, and sometimes employers will stand theirs. But you also show every hour of every day up and down the country in the work you do that cooperation is also the way forward, is the best way forward for the people you represent, as Len said in his speech on Monday. Now, sometimes I know cooperation is difficult.